If you want to use it, it should work. Yep, it does work. And then I think we're on the phone. 2 minutes. Oh, sorry, give you a signal. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, about 2 minutes, I'll just give you a signal.
Okay.
Step out, check, make sure the stream's working and everything.
Okay. All right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh my God. How are you? All right.
Huh?
How are you?
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
Fortunately, getting ready for spinal fusion number 4. Yeah.
That is not fun.
Last time. But I'm not can't complain. Okay.
Yeah, I had a full knee replacement 2 years ago. That's not fun either.
Yeah. 4 times. Then the birthday.
Trying to push that out as much as possible.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Still over 2 years, still
Yeah.
getting there. Man, it just more check the oil light comes on more.
It's sad. Plates from each other. Fused and now the plates are getting stuck. So I was like, you do need an oil can. Something short.
That's
Oh. I thought that was. I thought that. Good.
good.
So there's actually one do surgery on it. That's pretty spinal fusion.
All right, I'm going to kick this off because we have some virtual technology that's kicking off the virtual meetings and recording. So welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Baldzicki, and if you're not in the right setting, this is the session for specialty pharmacy patient journey mapping. With that, I'm Mike Baldzicki. I do not try my last name, and I just want to set the record straight since this is a really small group, informal. I do not have a big neck. I just have little ears. So just make sure everyone understands that. But I have 24 years overall experience, mainly in the specialty pharmacy infusion space, specifically in rare disease like hemophilia and IVIG and all those components. So I currently work with AscellaHealth. We are a global specialty pharmacy kind of platform service provider within the US and European. We do have a family of companies, Terabellum, which is our specialty GPO out in Dublin, Ireland, and also in the European markets. Then we also have Opnicare, which is almost a very rare disease, specialty pharmacy provider, wholesale 3PL hub services components. So with that, we service an array of segments in the specialty pharmacy space, meaning we work with patients, we have a hub and call center, we work with payers. Mainly our growth in payer segments is within TPAs, employer groups. I call it mid-market health plans, like 2 million lives or less, hospitals, and those kind of coalitions in those settings, as well as life sciences, meaning pharma. So we work with pharma, particularly in rare disease, gene and cell therapies, or market access, pre and post commercialization strategies and solutions around that segment. And then providers that we're seeing more and more focus on with acquisitions and integration with the provider landscape of what they're doing with their writing habits and grabbing data. So from there, we are an end-to-end solution within our platform, providing an array of solutions around those components. So if you need more information, let me know, but at least want to give a background of who I work for. So how I usually do things, I'm very informal. So all questions must be submitted in writing. But this is a small group, so if you have a question, just raise your hand. I do tend to go fast. My slides will be available. If not, come grab a card. I'm happy to send them to you. But I tend to kind of start off, going through some market insights, kind of why we're here around specialty pharmacy and what's going on with the patient journey mapping. Besides getting into the work streams, what's going on in a segment, and kind of creating some nuances that you may not be aware of, or things that you're probably aware of and hearing more and more about just because of where we're at. So from here, specialty pharmacy, from a trend perspective, a lot of people are focused around oncology and the market space around that with the products coming out. But I really tell folks, particularly employer groups and brokers like Lockton and those type of folks, that we're going to get hit in the face, I call it, with rare disease and gene and cell therapies that no one really is paying attention to. And the pipelines are very robust. And particularly the patient journey mapping is very selective in how you do that. And you're going to learn more and more about that and how we get into product archetypes and how we look at that patient journey mapping around those select segments. But again, this is a trend now. Everyone's kind of grabbing their arms around specialty pharmacy, trying to figure it out. And it's become a multifaceted environment, meaning everyone's become a specialty pharmacy, everyone's getting in specialty pharmacy, and everyone's grabbing certain specifications around specialty pharmacy. Also, medical channel. Big news around here, medical benefit management, infusion type services. The pipeline in especially 65%, I believe, is still going to be infusion. So that medical benefit, Q code, J code, et cetera, is not going to go away. And that's a big area of focus, particularly within your mid-market health plans and particularly the employers, just because of the spend there, the nuances of trying to grab cost containment in that area, managing the medical benefit, but wrapping around sites of service. So sites of service, sites of redirection for these infusion products. Then obviously the lovely gene and cell therapy that I think come Q4 are really going to catch the reinsurer stop loss entities off guard. Just because we probably we'll see probably 3 or 4 more approvals in the gene and cell therapy space by Q4 this year. And by, I believe, 2030, they say about 60 to 70 gene and cell therapies will be in the market. So with an average price tag between $3 and $4 million. So keep in mind that's just price tag alone versus non-ancillary charges that we're seeing be charged in a couple $100,000 to administer these type of products. And just an insight to the rare disease development pipeline, what's in phase 1, 2, 3, et cetera. And again, very robust pipeline. And I tell folks, not just focus on oncology. This is a pipeline for excluding oncology. So we're looking at a very robust pipeline that I think even first to come to launches in rare disease that people are not used to, working around not only benefit design and coverage, but how to manage these patients. What type of information are we going to see and grab, et cetera. So, very, very robust pipeline in rare disease marketplace. And again, the issue with rare disease is mostly drugs are going to be infused. Even the gene and cell therapies, it's all going to be centers of excellence, hospitals at that point. When you have 5 in the market for infusion and that coordination of care, the medical benefit, this is old data. I believe right now, 2022 just came out with an update that I think 68% of that spend on the medical benefit is with employers now. So they're focused, the TPAs, employer groups, are I call it the self-insured market, or health plans called ASOs, are largely focused in this area of medical benefit. If you would ask me 5 years ago if I thought specialty pharmacy carve-out was a trend, I would say no, it's a one-off. It is a trend. So with our TPA customers specifically that we work in the US, more and more of this discussion, especially pharmacy medical benefit carve-out, is happening just because they believe that the brokers and the health plans are not doing it. And they're pounding on their door saying, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to find a vendor and a broker and a benefit consultant to kind of figure this out and carve this away from you. Yes.
A salesman, this particular product understands that carve-out benefit and patients will have different practice than those employees, rather.
Yeah, nothing. From that standpoint. I think a survey even came out where 78% of VP of HRs and employee groups don't understand their own benefit design. But working with these TPAs, I can tell you, we do a lot of education around this within their sales account management team, or we try to, but their knowledge base is just typical PBM environment, and that's part of the problem, right? And they don't really get what does specialty pharmacy medical benefit carve out, because there's a large amount of I call it pre-work that needs to be done way ahead of time, usually 6-8 months before you even go to launch that kind of benefit design, to say what's your plan language, what's the contractual obligations that you got to look at, what do you start, how do I work this in, what's that coordination of care look like, carving that away from your typical PBM partners. And of course, your PBM partners will fight and scratch and even claw at this nuance, because most PBMs have their own specialty pharmacy and they're going to lose revenue stream. I've been in the infusion business for quite some time, and it still shocks me to see on some claims analysis that the infusion gross profit margin is, depending on type of drug like IVIG, ranges between 19 to 66%. So again, if you wonder why your PBMs are clawing and scratching and trying to not let loose of that grip, that's because it's a significant revenue stream loss, and you have no insight to that medical benefit, and they know that. So there's more and more vendors coming out to gain those insights and strategies around that. So with that, this is why we kind of get into this topic of specialty pharmacy. The products are complex, and this is just a short screen that we're seeing more diagnostics. We're looking at I call it more of digital therapeutics in a way that's launching. So if you really look at the market trends, especially pharmacy as a whole is going to be by 2030 a 800 billion plus market. The infusion market by 2026 is going to be a $150 billion market. And then if you look at digital therapeutics, digital engagement tools, that's a $13 billion market. So again, this is why we're seeing a huge rollover, I call it, in healthcare ecosystem, that we have so many multifaceted events happening with a large, unique opportunity of vendor solutions. But with that comes complexity, because this is not easy. I've been doing this for 24 years. I'm still learning. So, those that are trying to engage this and say, oh my gosh, I don't know that, we'll get on a train, because we're still learning as well, because it's shifting and shaping. And the reason for that is really trying to get into the product archetypes, understanding the product, the population base. Is it 5,000? Is it 1,000? Does it treat 200,000? Is it infusion, subcutaneous, injectable? What are the demographics versus geographics? I mean, there's a large number of tools that can give us this information based on the product. You just got to kind of grab it. But it's so siloed and fragmented. That's part of the problem, because a large number of our clients and even us, we have to go, seek 12 different vendors to kind of grab that type of information. And once you understand your product archetypes, then it gets into the nuances of what the payers are going to do, or the TPAs, based on the benefit design. So if it's subcutaneous injectable, or intramuscular, it's probably going to reside in the pharmacy benefit. If it's pure infusion, probably going to reside in medical benefit. So again, there's nuances of strategies going on. And if I can focus your attention to the far right, we're seeing new benefit designs coming into play with specialty now. Even certain TPAs looking at not covering specialty drugs anymore and putting them out to the market, it's called, or taking advantage of these alternative funding programs that are being more and more thought of these days from the employer groups, thinking it's free drug programs, and that's all they know of the horizon, and nothing beneath that. So again, it's getting more and more complex based on the type of design these payers are doing and what they're trying to drive with their self-insured markets, particularly. And as I said, specialty pharmacy to me really, if you talked to me 15 years ago, it was very small, very condensed, couple players, really not complex to manage, even the channel sourcing of it. It's become so much multifaceted, and reason for that is you got to think differently. It's just not looking at specialty pharmacy and the definition of specialty pharmacy. To me, you got specialty pharmacy benefit, the oral products that you got to treat differently and how you patient journey map that. Then you got medical benefit, meaning infusion services, and how you journey map that for the patient. And now you have rare disease, and that is a true category now, and how you journey map that for the patient. And then you got your gene and cell therapies that is going to be entirely different, and how we manage that. And again, it's going to shift and change even more, because if you follow gene and cell therapies, most of the products coming out, probably 5 or 8 in the next, probably 24 months, will still be infused in the hospital outpatient. But that volume of pipeline can't continue to be put there. So the specialty pharmacy world is going to kind of spill into that, of administering gene and cell therapies and how we do that, because there's huge complexities of even storage, refrigeration, et cetera, versus patient care mapping with gene and cell therapies in itself. So overall, specialty pharmacy management is complex, and I just wanted to grab some key areas around that. And I think part of the process, even we're going to see, if you look at probably in mid to the right area, I want to call out, just because we work within it, is prior authorization, set of care. So prior authorization is going to continue to evolve. I mean, it's still shocking that physicians are still majority of paper pushing. We're seeing a lot of nuances like RX Lightning and some other key technology sources come into this space and do it well. But medical necessity is going to be a continuing nuance as these pipelines come out. And then set of care, or I call it redirection programs, will continue to enhance. And the reason for that is we're outpacing the insurance design, and that's why it's becoming complex. We have a large amount of innovation, which is great, but let's face it, the healthcare ecosystem is behind. Banks have been way ahead of us in technology versus healthcare, right? How many of you get your text message over your banks and click on that little link and it drives you to your own bank and your system and who you are? We're not there yet. We're getting there. There's definitely some solutions around there, but we are far behind on product innovation. And that's part of the problem that we can't keep up versus, payers and health systems. I've been in this space for 24 years, as I said, and in the last 15, I would say health systems are really ramping up to become the new payer. So hospitals are putting a large emphasis on this segment, 600 beds or more. They probably have their own specialty pharmacy in its way, but they're also looking at their geographical markets. So you got hospitals like Trinity, Kettering, et cetera, Ochsner, that you're going to see become their own PBMs in 2 or 3 years, but also they're going to put out their own insurance design. Meaning, if I'm a Kettering in Dayton, Ohio, I'm going to compete with insurance plans. And I'm going to create my own benefit plan to Mike's Auto Body down the street because I'm going to manage my geographical presence in that way. And they believe they can be a better cost offset than their insurance plan. So then again, this is going to be very innovative how we drive that. So with that, presents problems for the prescriber, meaning consumerism, right? We tried this a couple of years ago, but putting more technology and power into consumer, it failed, and that's why we took it away. But I think it's back, and I think it just we kind of started that in the wrong time frame. I think now with technology and apps and where we're at, consumer empowerment is going to be huge. More and more people want to know what's going on and what they're paying for, and there's numerous venues to do that. So, besides automation, right? Looking at data sharing and data integration and grabbing the appropriate right of data versus consolidation. Never a dull moment. We continue to see acquisitions and M&A activity in the healthcare space that will not slow down. I would even pay attention to health systems and prescribers. I think now it's said 72% of physicians are owned by a health system. Besides United Optum and CVS acquiring provider groups, then chain drugstores. Don't lose sight of them. A large number of them, like Kroger, Hy-Vee, and some other large ones, have become their own PBM and put that in place and controlling that market segment as well. So the main goal is obviously with these market trends is setting the right patient journey, and that's the emphasis of this conference that we're trying to do. And the guidelines we try to do is obviously understand the therapeutic area and drug costs versus the product archetype, and then the administration benefit design. And number 3 is probably the most critical component that I believe that we got to really put some technology around is it self-infused? Is it subcutaneous? Does it have to be administered by a physician? Does it have to go to the outpatient facility? We have seen numerous cost savings in regards to a drug like Tepezza that's got a bill of 1.4 million by Cigna Credo to a TPA employer group saying it has to be administered here. And we actually white bag that to an ambulatory infusion center down the street and shave off over $900,000. True case example. But that's the world we reside in when you got to understand the patient journey mapping around these specialty drugs. Any questions at this point? Hopefully good. Quiet group. So the next kind of slides is going to get into really some work streams. It's high level. I'm going to make a couple points on them, but again, my slides will be available. They get into the details of various patient journeys. And again, what we've been trying to do in specialty pharmacy, and I worked for Diplomat to infusion companies and all those, is we really try to be holistic in our collaboration around specialty pharmacy management. Has that occurred? No. I think 3 areas that we really still lack in is integration, the holistic of the patient, and data sharing. It's very siloed and choppy and fragmented. But we're getting there because of technology. And technology has really shaped us to kind of create almost a seamless patient experience based on these 6 core areas. And we're going to see more and more development in that. because of the technology era that we're seeing, patient engagement tools, consumer empowerment, to really understand how do we educate patients? When's their next fill? How do we intervene clinically? Especially look at medical benefit. The clinical component is such a mess, we can't even grab that data, but we're getting there. And the reason for that is I'm sure a lot of you understand this is the maze we operate in. This is the current ecosystem. It's made to be crazy for a reason if you don't understand that. And what we're trying to get to is a high touch support patient journey mapping that really is seamless, that allows patient engagement, technology, data capturing. But the issue is one framework doesn't fit all patients now. We're just not dealing with specialty pharmacy, right? As I said, we're looking at rare disease, even first time launches of therapeutical areas that we've never seen before. We don't even have any data. So again, trying to understand that framework of a holistic view of the patient is still going to be a challenging factor moving forward in this space. And again, if you're really following the components of gene and cell therapy, we're going to have to follow these patients 5-8 years. If you even look at hemophilia gene and cell therapy, I did a big presentation with the National Hemophilia Foundation to a large group of TPAs because they thought, wow, gene and cell therapy, the first one's going to be approved with a $4 million, $5 million price tag. Is every prescriber patient going to be put on this? No. And the reason for that is if you understand gene and cell therapy criteria, what it takes to be on a gene and cell therapy. You can't drink and smoke, can't drink alcohol. I mean, those alone just cut 80% probably of patients in this area off. So that criteria is really rigorous to be on a gene cell therapy. And also, if you understand gene cell therapy, most providers and patients will wait till they're probably 8 or 10 on the market, because once you try one, you're done. So again, this is going to be an evolving factor as these products hit the market, and it's going to hit. And I can tell you, working with brokers and stop loss and reinsurers, they're not ready. They are not ready for this. And I think it's going to hit them in the face pretty hard when we see 3 in the market, being approved Q4, probably 4 or 5. But again, what we're trying to do is provide that seamless experience. And the biggest issue on this slide is really navigating not only patient's benefit, because that's going to keep on evolving, but really, how do we intervene clinically? What's appropriate? I come from the hemophilia IVIG and alpha-1 and protein C deficiency space back in the 90s. I remember when there were 8 factor VIII products. Now we have 23, with 24 in the pipeline, including gene cell therapy. Back then, payers never really looked at hemophilia. One, it was so high touch and sensitive, but the average price tag of a patient journey experience was $175,000. They did on-demand dosing, very complex, different area for infusion. Now, because of the way they dose and the many products that are available to them, with the price tags to them, the average dose of hemophilia is over $600,000. So overnight, a self-insured employer group can have $1 million claim by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And the reason for that is these therapies are so wonderful. 18 to 36 years of age patients are very comfortable. We service some that are playing lacrosse and hockey. And again, if you understand hemophilia, they get hit hard or anything, they bleed. Joint, muscle, anything. So again, I'll reiterate that. We have some playing lacrosse and field hockey. So again, you can imagine it's an average $600,000 claim. 20-year-old playing lacrosse at college gets hit, goes in the ER for a joint muscle bleed. That employer has got $1 million claim plus overnight on his table. What do? Who pays for that? So again, the specialty pharmacy treatment journey never ends as we try to reinvent it, enhance it, and really streamline what our steps are going to be. Besides the front end, I think the back end of this is really going to be hard in regards to the clinical monitoring of these type of patients. And again, don't forget what we're trying to do, especially in medical benefit type drugs and gene and cell and rare disease, is understand the clinical service component. Grab that information. Right now, I think nurses just type in screens and they try to grab the screens. I mean, there's some tools out there I've seen that are drop down and grab that information more on a data spec, but it's still, typing diagnostics and what the response to talking to the patient is. So we got to understand the patient journey, but also involve the healthcare provider journey as well, and match that integration of communication trails to that. As we do that, the physician gets more streamlined care. We have more appropriate intervention. And again, this is just a nice streamline of what this maybe should look like. But again, I'm going to complicate it again. Because now what we got to do and what we're going to see is continuous enhancements on the manufacturer of specialty hub services. So if you look in the middle, these are going to continue to evolve with manufacturers in their product launches, especially in the rare disease and gene cell therapy space. Every single manufacturer is going to be launched with a hub service model. In that complexity, now we deal with financial services. And that is a nuance in itself, not just dealing with copay maximizers, as we all heard, but patient assistance programs and the lovely alternative funding programs. And if you don't understand alternative funding and that criteria, that's a whole new book of business in itself and evolving. Besides, now with gene and cell therapies and even million-dollar claims, we're going to see loan-based programs, right? Outcomes-based performance, value-based contracting, right, with manufacturers and their products. That's going to be tied to a financial incentive to say who pays for what. And that's a whole different topic I give on financial services around the space. But if you're not paying attention to that as advocates and working with patients, these financial programs are going to continue to evolve in the stop-loss reinsurance broker space. There's a large, Pfizer just announced with their CAR T-cell another, financial value-based agreement that if it doesn't perform based on these clinical markers, we pay. Who's tracking that? And how does the patient understand that? And again, what we do with patient management programs is really around guidelines. And I just stuck this slide there as this is nothing new, but if you follow oncology, the ever-evolving clinical pathways, I call it, which are lovely if you ever dealt with them, Avicor, AIM are two large ones. That's going to be an evolving factor around not just oncology, but other therapeutical areas around hospital systems, large ones like Cleveland Clinic, versus healthcare plans, developing their own clinical pathways based on the robust amount of programs that are going to be out there, the number of products. They have to create these guidelines. So oncology uses NCCN and other ones that bank up against companies like Avicor that's owned by Express Scripts, Cigna, and AIM that's owned by now Elevate, which is AKA Anthem, to say, we're going to drive a clinical pathways program for oncology. So that's an area that if you don't follow, I highly suggest you do, because that's going to affect how we journey map this in other therapeutic areas that I'm hearing it's going to step into, maybe neurology, nephrology, again, where the pipeline is really robust. We're going to start seeing clinical pathways develop in that area. And the reason for that is basically, what's the stratification plan? So when we get the referral to how we track outcomes is the biggest question mark these days in specialty pharmacy, particularly rare disease and gene and cell therapies. So we got to develop these stratification plans to really understand mainly when does it go back, when's appropriate, and the middle part is where do we intervene? Are there replacements? Factor VIII hemophilia is a great area because we have so many factor VIII products that some are very similar, where sometimes going to the new one just because it's a new shiny object in a room necessarily isn't the best alternative to move off product. And we've seen that happen. So we've seen patients do very well on Advait and all of a sudden go to one of the newer brands, and this patient was probably $200,000. And now all of a sudden that employer's got a $700,000 claim. Was that appropriate? Where do you intervene? Yep.
Are they moving because of non-med switching, or why would a patient like that move?
So they're getting their physician to kind of, recommend the move, or the physician recommends a move. And again, we've seen this with physicians as well that, we did we're in a litigation component where if we had a physician, we found that, only was switching these patients because they made $150,000 a year speaking for the manufacturer, right? So that does happen. So again, when do you intervene? When's appropriate? Is it clinical? Is it personal? all those things matter in these kind of spaces. And I wanted to make sure we put this slide up here. I'm not a pharmacist, but boy, do I appreciate them, especially when I get sick because I'm a baby. But that pharmacist role is evolving, not only in retail but within specialty pharmacy. And they're coaches at this point. They're going to be in charge of interchangeability in some states based on product choices. So again, always understand what the pharmacist's role. And again, what the complexity of this is, I think it's going to be really kind of managed by state legislation and mandates in that area, unfortunately. But again, the reason for that is how do we put risk assessments? And I want to put two examples. This is a hemophilia risk assessment. So understand each bucket over here, each quadrant that's listed has 15 to even 30 questions that go through and that are graphed. And these are real assessments. So these are just the buckets we kind of profile in. MS is the same way. So we're trying to grab risk assessments, risk stratification plans in place so we know when they're going to be. And we're tracking the data, we're grabbing it appropriately and responding back with those platforms in a very rigorous way, not only to the employee, but to the employer and the health insurance plan and the PBM maybe. But these are so important. I think these are going to continue to evolve and grow in the rare disease gene cell therapy market. And the reason for that is we got to get data driven, right? What's our unified direction around how much data is good data and what's appropriate to identify these type of members and move them forward a more unified patient engagement outcomes-based cost savings model. And at the end of the day, if you're talking to payers, and really, it's the self-insured market that's making a lot of noise. So if you don't understand self-insured third-party administrators, TPAs, or ASOs, administrative service only, look at your, Elevate or Anthem or Cigna or Humana. Probably not Humana. Humana is more Medicare. But these entities will list on their reports the breakdown of their lives. So you take Anthem, 38 million member base. That's what most people think of them. They're a monster. 96% are self-insured ASOs. Vastly different change in spectrum of private insurance 15 years ago. So the self-insured TPA space is growing. They're pushing more consumer out-of-pocket expense to the consumer to save costs. So the TPA space, the self-insured market, isn't going away. So we got to make sure we're frameworking them with the right appropriate information to make decisions. Because I can tell you, they don't understand the space. Yes.
How are the insured plans managing this new paradigm of treatment?
Yeah, great question. I mean, even when I started with this organization almost 4 years ago to launch them into a specialty pharmacy vendor, solution healthcare organization, we went after the TPA and employer space right away. And I told my board that the self-insured, the big health plans, that's just a long-term strategy. And typically, just knowing the market, they're tied to their big box PBMs just because of the financial incentives there. So they're not going to move. They're going to continue to listen to their PBMs and garner those financial components where they need to, good or bad. I'm not saying it's worse. I think the large box PBMs are very good. You can't compete. They do a very good job in retail and mail. But when it comes to this space, especially pharmacy management, particularly in rare disease and gene cell therapies, I think they should stay out. And it's the data showing us that they're not proving cost savings. We continue to see the margin gain in spreads that they continue to gain, but they keep on acquiring things. So what do you do?
One more question.
Yeah.
Groups, are those every size employer? Is it small, medium sized, and large, or is it predominantly mid, major employers that are in that self-insured market generally?
Yeah, I mean, usually it's the big boys, but we deal with like Imagine 360. They're pretty large, over 500,000 lives. Plan sponsors. We have 90 Degrees, another probably 600,000, 14 TPA consortium. A large number of the big boys won't go to the lower TPAs or employer groups that are, say, 100 lives or less. We won't, just to help them out. Even we'll do one-offs LOAs, right, just to get that one claim off their desk. That's probably killing them on the benefit design. So, as I said, the unified direction that we got to do not only on patient engagement of making sure providing quality, but I think we're going to see a movement more and more with technology on electronic health records integration to grab that type of information. I've seen some really cool platforms that kind of do that. Right now we're still so siloed when we are as a hospital inpatient to when we get discharged, what happens? And I think that siloed breakdown is going to be tied eventually, if not already, and how we grab that and extend that either to the home or to an ambulatory infusion center to manage these patients. We're even seeing a large number of strategies that are taking typical emergency room procedures and putting them in the home. And we're going to save thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that. And again, it's specific based on the patient. I mean, you don't want to probably go do that with a member that maybe lives in a trailer park with 6 other dudes, probably not an appropriate setting. But there's things that we got to grab to understand what's appropriate and what's not to do these type of procedures and save costs. Besides, as I said, technology will intervene at some point, and we're going to continue to see that involvement based on all the nuances that we're seeing there with integration with these companies. But that's part of the complexity, right? There's so many. I mean, if you look at just medication therapy management companies, I think there's 800 of them out there launching in this type of area. Besides the increased mental health, companies. At the end of the day, it's really about how do we grab clinical integration to manage these and how do we intervene in my mind, because that's been lacking. We can ship drug, we can, grab that type of information, we can have dose and all those cost savings. But if you don't really understand the clinical components of what you're doing and how you're grabbing that from prescriber to patient to what's being shipped to when to what the patient thinks about it, how they're going to manage it, you're going to have lost cause and just have increased costs. So again, what do we got to do from a patient first experience on that patient journey mapping is really understanding, these areas and they're key quadrants in my mind. And I really tell folks, we're all about cost of drugs or cost of these type of patients or therapies. Keep in mind, there is a statistic out there that 70% of overall healthcare costs still goes to lifestyle and behavioral modifications. So if we really want to tackle this area of patient journey mapping with technology and patient engagement tools, it's really looking at holistically, not just the health, but the behavior of why they do things certain ways and how we change your lifestyle. Again, obesity is still the number one cause of rise of a lot of things from that standpoint, which gets us to, again, personalized care. Where do we get, that support for that behavioral component to live discussions, right? I think over the last few years, at least myself, I've learned a lot on being virtual. I was a big advocate of, old school. I'd do anything to be live in a meeting. And that taught me to reshift my focus and how we work with, not only business, but how do we engage members, right? How do we present in these Zoom calls and go-to meetings? But even a lot of my procedures I was telling a mutual colleague here that 2 years ago, I had to go to a full knee replacement. So I'm 49 years old, obviously played football with a big neck in college, which alluded to my full knee replacement. I was basically dropped off like a hot pizza delivery at the orthopedic surgery office because of COVID, and there by myself. So if it wasn't for technology and the way they did things to communicate with me and give me updates, would have been lost and probably nervous as hell because that's not a fun surgery. So again, I think more and more is going to be done in how we look at this experience and how we coordinate with technology and care teams around that. And that is it. I'll leave some time for questions and answers. Now I did fast, so any questions?
I have a question. My name is Irene. I'm with All Center for Patient Safety. We're a patient safety organization. Throughout today's conference, I haven't heard the word safety yet. And I don't know if you're the right person for this question, but I'm going to throw it out for your opinion at least. So the studies are that $40 billion are spent on medication errors each year, and 21 billion, and that's on the patients. 21 billion is on medication errors each year. My question is, and I have personal interest because I did a proposal on this, is why aren't TPAs or the insurance industry spending more time educating the public on medication safety? Now that the insurance is paying for all of this, and all we get is on the commercials is the ending of all the terrible things that can happen, and you maybe could die type things. But there's education that can go with the use of medication and these errors that are happening, and nobody seems to be focusing on educating the public. I'm doing this for 25 years, and I'm on my 25th year of trying to get through the public should have more information on safe medication use. Just wondering your opinion on that.
I absolutely agree. So, one of our case studies I do a lot is I call it dose optimization. With medications, particularly in $50,000 or more, you have a large number of costs at hand if something goes wrong. Dose optimization is one of the biggest things that we try to manage more aggressively with the member engagement to make sure, what we're being paid for and how we deliver that medication and the dose is appropriate. Because we don't want, especially in infusion drugs, if you understand infusion drugs, like oncology, you can over provide. So that's where we do split pill programs and all that to make sure how they administer, are they doing it right, and is it the dose appropriate? Because a lot of them will over infuse. If you understand, hemophilia, factor VIII is a large, costly drug, millions of dollars. If I need 200,000 units and my pharmacy sends me 500,000 units, I'm going to inject all 500,000. Nothing happens to me. There's no adverse events. I just wasted a lot of money. But that's what they do sometimes, or they share their medications with their family members, etc. So I think safety and quality is a big issue. I think consumers are not there yet. I was in a large employer group conference, and it was a large TPA talking about this on consumer empowerment. And we tried to do that a couple of years ago, failed miserably. Consumers were just not there. And again, I think we're a little bit late back then to where we're at now with technology. I think we need to get better with integration of what consumer empowerment means and what engagement looks like for patients. Because I can tell you, even with our tools and technology, we run into numerous complications with patients not wanting to be engaged. And it's almost an era of say, don't touch my stuff, leave me alone, I'm fine. And they're not. They're, we have patients with, hemophilia factor where you should be ordering 30 days before your next, right? And we have patients ordering 2 days before their next when they're out. So if they're out, they're going to go to the ER. So, this complexity of consumer empowerment and safety and quality is a big one because consumers do got to educate themselves. And I think with technology, it's got to be appropriate how we engage that. And the utility tools that we are seeing develop do that. I think we're overrun by apps, right? So I think it's got to be more enriched text messaging, physician empowerment. Besides, what we're going to see is incentives. A large number of employers are trying to give back to employers. So there's, if you attend the SIA conference or HCAA, these are large employer TPA conferences. SIA is coming up in October. So there's a large number of case examples that these employer groups are saying, hey, we partnered with these three hospitals. So women, if you're pregnant, if you get your pregnancy, deliver your baby there, we got these rates settled. You're going to save us money. We're going to get that money back to you in your paycheck. So there's nuances there to incentivize members to do the right thing, be engaged, to save the plan money. And that could be that way. It could be other incentives that we're seeing, rewards, all sorts of things that were, less benefit design cost, right? All those things when they renewal. So again, more and more is coming from that. And I think we're just going to be innovative to make sure the consumer is engaged and empowered to make those decisions. And I agree. I mean, medication error is a big one, huge cost. And a lot of it's just dose, especially on infusion drugs. Hopefully that answers your question.
It's not just cost in our, So we represent, Eileen, myself, and a handful of others. We do not come from your world. We come from a world where everything is supposed to go great. It doesn't go so great. We're determined to make sure that bad things don't happen to other people in the hospital. system. So that's why she's asking questions about the patient safety. But my question to you is, when you have that non-compliant or that disinterested patient, for example, and you're up against the wall, what do you do?
So our approach is a little bit differently than I think most entities out there don't do much. But we partner with advocacy groups, so we have
What's the
a National Hemophilia Foundation.
Okay.
So we're endorsed by our program with
Do
them.
they like go out there and talk to these people?
No, so if we have complicated cases that we're working with an employer group and we find a disengaged employee that the employer is trying to, hey, I'm willing to cover their costs, I want to cover the benefit, you know, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Can't even get a hold of them on the phone, right? So we'll engage the NHF to kind of actively pursue ways to do that. From that,
there's another bureaucratic middleman involved in trying to get somebody to.
Yeah, we'll find out the physician, try and engage the physician. I mean, there's numerous steps we take. We have protocols, obviously we do it when we have those type of situations. And it's really, like I said, we have a stratification based on disease category. So, besides therapeutical programs that we have, we actually took 5 classes: hemophilia, IVIG, MS, oncology, certain chemotherapy oncology, and MS, NH, hemophilia, IVIG, MS, oncology, and HAE. And we drove certain programs a little bit more intensely with those based on risk stratification.
I had one more question about what your experience is with any of the health share organizations or plans, what do you call them?
So the TPAs, you mean?
Well, the TPAs, no, the health sharing started off. It seems to me like it's making a comeback. It's non-traditional. It's not employer funded. It is not an insurance plan.
I know. Yeah.
People contributing.
Yeah, there's one we work with out of California that's actually launching insurance kind of plans in Ohio. I'm all about them. I mean, again, it's just really what I find out when these type of new plans come into play. They don't know much about specialty pharmacy. I think holistically, people think specialty pharmacy is one definition. As I illustrated, it's a different umbrella nowadays. And when you get into rare disease, gene and cell therapy, particularly infusion products, there's not a lot that people don't understand the space. They really don't.
So what do we do about that? No, I guess that you're station.
Yeah, I think we're just here. I mean, I tell a lot of people we're just here getting our arms around specialty pharmacy. I mean, 5 years ago, a lot of it just was one-off, right? So I think we're getting there, and we're seeing even in the last 2 years, the amount of new vendors coming out to say they do medical benefit management, infusion management, is huge. So we're not the only player. There's like Vivio and Archimedes and some good data companies even out there that give good insights to what the spend is and where about to go try to contain it. And it's just, again, I don't want to
share your data.
yes. So that's the biggest thing too is most pulling teeth out of the Anthem and the big PBMs to get the data. I mean, I'm dealing with right now with a PBM with a Epic Brokers that they can't get the data from the PBM. They won't send it. So we can do a cost model analysis. But it's her data. So that's the age that we're relying in is why can't people give data, right? It's her data. So they won't. Again, how do we overcome that? And again, we're still here trying to get there and get people across the goal line. And I think technology will do that. And I think new vendors in the space, because if you follow even the brokers, Locked In, Willis Towers Watson, March, Epic, I mean, for the first time, I've dealt with them most of my career. 2 years ago, I call it a shift. They're reaching out, and if you even look at Willis Towers Watson, they put the first time out an RFP for specialty pharmacy medical benefit carve-out vendors, going away from their typical PBMs that fill their back pockets. Locked In, Zoom, the same thing. So again, we're seeing these nuances because I call it the mid-market, the health plans at 2 million lives or less, the self-insured market screaming at their brokers, screaming at their benefit design consultants, saying, "You're not doing anything. This is killing me. This is 71% of my spend, 2 or 3% of my population. I get one of these claims for gene cell therapy that bankrupts my school district overnight. What are you doing? If not, I'm going to go figure it out myself." And there's vendors now out there. So I think that's where we're at. Anything else? All right. Love to end early. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.